The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today in this true crime documentary, we will discuss one of the most shocking marriage betrayal stories. Law enforcement officers visited Anthony Todd's Celebration, Florida, residence on January 13, 2020, to serve a warrant against him in connection with fraud allegations. However, they were all horrified to find a dog's body and 4 severely decaying human bodies. Anthony Todd's wife Megan and 3 children were among the members of his family whose dead were discovered in his home, not strangers. And Anthony Todd was the murderer, not just any hitman or armed robber. On September 29, 1975, Anthony Todd was born in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. He grew up surrounded by dysfunction and did not have a typical upbringing like other children in his school and social milieu. Robert Todd, his high school teacher father, had an unsettling preference for girls much younger than himself. Loretta Todd, Anthony's mother, was a homemaker who was unaware that her husband was having extramarital affairs and sex with girls in his class who were 16 and 17. The issue was more serious than it first appeared to be. Robert had a relationship with one of his students and was simultaneously engaged to a nurse. All of this occurred during his marriage to Loretta. Robert made the decision to marry his fiancée and completely remove his wife from the picture after concealing his relationships and indiscretions. Anthony Todd was just 4 years old at this time. He heard his mother yelling from her bedroom one night when he woke up. Anthony Tony Todd heard a gunshot shortly after that. He found his mother, who was amazingly still alive, lying on the floor when he entered her room. Loretta survived the attempted murder despite being shot in the eye at close range. The investigation quickly revealed that Anthony's father, Robert Todd, wasn't as distraught as a typical husband would be following such a startling event. Instead, he appeared annoyed and dissatisfied that his wife had lived. Law enforcement officials quickly discovered that Robert was involved in his wife's murder attempt. This was validated when additional research into the case showed the startling fact that Robert Todd had killed his wife Loretta by offering to pay one of his mentally ill students $900 in exchange for a particular assignment. Robert intended for the murder to seem to be a home invasion. He handed over a weapon, the key to his home, and directions to the bedroom where his wife would be sleeping. Tony's mental health suffered greatly as a result of the tragedy, and he struggled to bounce back. Loretta remarried after divorcing her husband and made every effort to assist her kid overcome the trauma. But after learning that his biological father had attempted to murder his mother, Tony's mental state had been irreparably harmed. Anthony Todd had mental health problems, yet he was a very well-behaved and diligent student. He received votes to be the class president in both his junior and senior years as a result. Tony initially got to know Megan when they were in high school. Over time, Tony and Megan became friends, and after high school, they even chose to pursue related degrees. Tony and Megan made the decision to be married a few months after they graduated from college. The pair relocated from Pennsylvania to Connecticut shortly after getting married, where they opened their own physical therapy practice. After working together to expand their business and practicing physiotherapy, Megan discovered she was expecting their first child a few years later. As a result, Megan was forced to quit her job as a physiotherapist, and the couple had Alec, their first child. The Todd family consisted of Anthony, Megan, and their 3 kids, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, following a few additional pregnancies and some regrettable miscarriages. Tony was the best husband and father anyone could wish for, and the family was the epitome of the American ideal. He promised to support his kids and remained true to Megan. In addition, He made sure to be present for his children during significant events, such as sporting sessions and school functions. Megan, who was now a full-time housewife, was just as committed to her kids. In the neighborhood, the Todds were a respected family. This was due in part to Anthony's physical therapy practice, which had expanded dramatically over the years. The couple chose to purchase a condo in Celebration, Florida, a master-planned neighborhood close to Walt Disney World Resort, after the money began to flow in. For the Todd family, it was the ideal location since it offered contentment, tranquility, and, above all, security. However, as soon as the condo became too tiny for their family, they relocated to a house close by. The Todds were leading a contented family life, playing games, going to piano recitals, playing sports, visiting the beach, and taking day trips to Disney World. Tony's company was in Connecticut, so he would go back to work alone, leaving Megan and the children behind. The Todd family's lives had been picture-perfect up until 2011, when everything changed. Megan contracted Lyme disease, a bacterial infection, after being bitten by a tick when she was a teenager. Until something stimulates it and sparks its symptoms, Lyme disease typically remains dormant for years without causing any health problems. That's what transpired with Megan. Megan told her husband she had been bitten by a bug in 2011 after visiting Disney World. The pair initially believed that, like in most situations of this kind, the illness would go within a few days. But it soon developed into major health issues. Hepatitis, tonsillitis, and a number of other illnesses were quickly identified in Megan. Megan experienced mental health issues as well, and over time, her personality underwent a radical transformation. Megan was diagnosed with depression at some point after her health problems started, and it only became worse after she miscarried again. It was very difficult for Megan because Tony could only be in Celebration on the weekends because he was in Connecticut managing the business the rest of the week. She also lacked the kind of communal support the family had experienced in Connecticut, which made matters worse. Megan believed that Tony's physiotherapy firm was doing very well, but it wasn't at all. That was the only bright spot in the whole situation. Anthony Todd was the primary cause of the company's prolonged lack of profitability. He had been purchasing condos nationwide using corporate cash with the intention of renting them to tourists, but the properties didn't turn a profit as he had hoped, and the majority were losing money. The meager earnings from the physiotherapy firm were insufficient to operate 2 homes in separate states, pay for Tony's plane ticket and Megan's medical expenses. Anthony Todd took out a little loan to help him get by as his financial troubles worsened, but he was unable to repay it when the time came, so he took out another loan to pay back the previous one, and so on. Before they knew it, things had rapidly gotten worse. Tony's personal debt was less than $100,000. In addition, he had 2 mortgages for the family's homes in Florida and Connecticut, as well as business debts. Anthony had been keeping the financial issues a secret from Megan up until this point, but he opted to maintain it that way because he felt it was time to tell his wife the truth. To make matters worse, he believed that using fraud to pay back their loans was a smart idea. When the funds arrived, Anthony paid back the smaller of almost 20 loans totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. He began sending bills to various health insurance companies and the Medicaid program for physiotherapy treatments that he had never provided to his patients. After a while, the insurance companies became concerned, and in 2019, the FBI launched an inquiry. Although Tony's patients had only visited their physiotherapist once or twice a week, they complained to the FBI agents that their insurance companies were paying them for 5 sessions each week. Some patients hadn't seen Tony in months since they had moved out of state. The FBI detectives were encouraged by these findings to surreptitiously review the records of the 2 clinics Tony had been running, and they found inconsistencies right away. On days when the clinics weren't even open, there were bills for therapy sessions. Even though the clinic was closed on the day of the surveillance, Tony nonetheless sent bills to insurance companies for the therapy sessions of 16 different individuals. Anthony Todd was brought in for interrogation by the authorities. At first, he denied any misconduct, but after hearing first-hand accounts from a number of his patients, he was unable to persuade investigators of his version of events. In the end, he acknowledged that he had committed fraud, but he maintained that his wife was unaware of it. If Megan wasn't included, he also consented to enter a guilty plea to any further accusations. Tony lost his physiotherapy license in September 2019, and both of his clinics were abruptly shut down without warning his staff. Anthony had not yet been placed under arrest, despite his admission. He informed the investigators in November 2019 that he would return to Connecticut during the first week of December after visiting his family in Florida. Although he was permitted to visit Celebration, he never made it back to Connecticut. The family maintained in touch on a regular basis, but when Christmas arrived, Anthony's sisters told the Celebration police that she hadn't heard from them in weeks. She informed the police that she was especially concerned about her brother because she was aware that he was being investigated for fraud. She added that Anthony informed her that Megan and the children had become ill and hadn't left their beds in a few days during their most recent phone conversation with her brother. She wondered whether the sickness was more serious than her brother had informed her because Tony never contacted again. To conduct a welfare check, police officers knocked on the Todd's house on December 29, 2019. The bell went unanswered, and there were no indications that anyone was home. The Celebration Sheriff's Department reported that the family had most likely returned to Connecticut. 2 additional weeks passed before it was discovered that the whole Todd family had spent the entire time inside their Celebration house. The Todd family's home was visited on January 13, 2020, by Osceola Sheriff's Department police officers and Department of Health and Human Services investigators. For 3 days, they rapped on the front door but got no answer from the inside. Authorities were persuaded that the Todd family was still in Connecticut because of an eviction notice that was displayed on the front of the property. Tony's sisters, meantime, reported to the local police that Tony and Megan's numbers had been sending the family unsettling messages. Around this same period, Anthony Todd was followed to Celebration by the FBI agent looking into his fraud case. This was because, ever since he left Connecticut to celebrate Thanksgiving with his family in Florida, he had not returned. While parked outside the family's Celebration home, an FBI agent saw Anthony leave the house, remain on the patio for a short while, and then return inside. Officers from the local sheriff's department arrived at the residence in a matter of minutes to arrest Anthony Todd after the agent promptly notified them. However, according to the formal request from the couple's families, the police also had an obligation to inquire about Megan and the children's well-being. Tony told the authorities that Megan was sleeping and the children were at a sleepover when they inquired about them. But a peculiar odor alerted the officers that they needed to examine the premises. The stench was strong and recognizable as soon as the police stepped into the main bedroom. It was the stench of a dead person. The decaying bodies of Megan, 42, and their 2 kids, Alec and Tyler, astounded the law enforcement officers. In the room, the family dog was also dead. The 4-year-old Zoe, meanwhile, was not present. The bodies had obviously been there for a few weeks. The fact that Tony had been sleeping next to his deceased wife the entire time was even more unsettling. Zoe was also present in the room when the forensic specialists began to remove the remains. Her remains had fused with her mother's because they were so horribly decayed. Anthony was taken into custody right away and questioned about what had transpired at his home. According to the deceased's post-mortem report, Zoe was the only victim who had not been stabbed in the abdomen. In the report, the medical examiners also noted that they were killed in late December 2019, around Christmas. At first, Anthony denied knowing anything about the killings of his wife and children. However, He eventually admitted to the authorities that Megan and him had signed a death pact because they both feared the end of the world was near. Additionally, he claimed that Megan helped him carry out his murderous plans by breaking into each of his children's beds. He stabbed Alec and Tyler and strangled Zoe. Anthony claims that Megan then killed herself by stabbing herself in the stomach. Prosecutors said they will pursue the death sentence for Anthony Todd's horrific crime after he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The killer and his confession were in the hands of the authorities. Tony, however, changed his narrative before the trial started. He shared a revised account of what transpired in their celebration house with his father in a 26-page letter. According to Tony's rewritten version of events, his late wife Megan was the new culprit. He claimed in the letter that his wife was to blame for their children's deaths and that he was totally innocent of all the accusations made against him. One by one, she stabbed them after giving them Benadryl and separating them. In the letter, he said that he had picked up a necklace for his daughter and driven the family van to their neighboring condo the night before the event to do some repairs. He went on to say that while Megan was preparing a pie for the children, he even played hoops with the boys in the driveway before departing. He claimed that because the oils Megan used to treat her ailments hurt his sinuses, he never went back inside that night and instead chose to sleep in the van. He had to walk back to the house when he woke up the following morning since the van wouldn't start. Anthony Todd claims that the half-eaten blueberry pie was on the kitchen counter the following morning when he returned home and noticed that it smelled peculiar. In the letter, he stated that Megan had told him she had killed her children after seeing a vision of the end of the world. After that, he begged Megan not to harm herself, but she stabbed herself to death. Throughout the letter, Tony presented himself as a defenseless spectator. He even claimed that he attempted to get in touch with law enforcement, but that there was no functional phone in the house. He claimed that in order to soothe them, he placed all of the dead in the master bedroom and covered them with blankets. While incarcerated before trial, he also told his sister multiple versions of the incident. He admitted to his sister over the phone that he had no recollection of his family's murders. Anthony Todd entered a not guilty plea to the accusations of 4 murders when it came time to do so. When the trial started, the prosecution informed the judge that Tony killed his family because his fraudulent financial operations were going to be exposed, not because he wanted to free their souls or because he feared the end of the world. Tony's family also shared information about his mental health problems. When the family relocated to Celebration, Florida, everything changed drastically, even though they were close to the community in Connecticut, according to his sister. Tony gained a lot of weight and was diagnosed with diabetes during those 2 years. She informed the court that he also began to conceal his financial and professional information from others. Tony claimed to be a distraught husband who had lost his wife and 3 children when it came time for him to testify. He occasionally broke down in tears when asked about Megan's medical history, although he appeared annoyed whenever he interrupted to voice an objection. He informed the judge that Megan had been diagnosed with Lyme illness when she was a teenager. He also mentioned that Megan had been diagnosed with a cardiac condition prior to their meeting. He also described Megan's drug-induced hepatitis. He insisted throughout his evidence that he was totally innocent and that his wife, Megan, was to blame for their children's deaths. Additionally, he informed the jury that once conventional drugs failed to alleviate Megan's symptoms, she became highly influenced by a religious group. Tony claims that after meeting this group online, his wife quickly came to believe that the hereafter was superior since she would be free from all physical and mental afflictions. According to him, Megan frequently used Skype to attend the religious group's meetings, and he occasionally sat with her as well. He claims that Megan was given various prayers to recite in order to assist her with all of her life's issues. Megan, he revealed, had begun to believe in a concept known as family lineage karma burning. She believed that every afterlife was linked to past incarnations and that her family would find redemption by burning their karma in this life, which would lead to their reincarnation into a better one. According to Tony, Megan joined the religious group in order to improve her health and her relationships with those who had verbally or otherwise harmed her. Anthony Todd told the jury the same version of events that he had written in the letter to his father, but he also combined it with the version he told his sister. He claimed he didn't remember making any taped confessions to the police and that he wasn't in the house when the killings occurred. He said that Megan brought him into the room and confessed to killing their children when he arrived home the following morning. He also mentioned that he broke his neck after falling down the stairs and hitting his head on them since he was so horrified by all that had happened. He told the jury that until he woke up in jail, he couldn't recall what had happened next. He claimed to be unaware of the taped confession and to have seen the video for the first time in court when questioned about it. However, in his taped confession, he informed the investigators that he and Megan had planned to kill their children together, and that the children knew they were going to die soon because Megan and he had obtained their agreement before killing them. Surprisingly, however, he denied that he killed the family dog. He also responded to the issue of when he killed his family, which was 2 days prior to Christmas 2019, in the confession that was recorded. He told the jury that he wanted to end his life and be with his wife and kids when he saw them dead. He tried hanging himself numerous times, slit his wrists, and took several doses of Benadryl for that. He expanded on his story by claiming that he called for assistance from the window because his wife had all the phones in the home. He went to a nearby store to purchase a gun and attempt suicide after no one came to his aid. He also disclosed to the detectives the suicide note he and Megan had written together in his taped confession. The note stated that their family had made the decision to take their own lives for a number of reasons. They claimed to be witnessing the fulfillment of the end-of-the-world prophecy and made the decision to forego the anticipated torment, apocalyptic death, and ongoing suffering. Because the ultimate goal was to be together without pain and suffering. The note also mentioned that Megan would be pain-free once she died. Anthony Todd told the court about his wife's death, stating that she had stabbed herself twice in the stomach after taking a lot of Benadryl. However, the autopsy report states that the downward angle of the stab would clearly suggest that she was killed by someone else. Anthony Todd was found guilty of 4 counts of murder by a unanimous jury in 2022. He received a 4-life sentence without the chance of release. In a surprising decision, the judge extended Anthony's sentence by 1 year for the animal cruelty charges he faced since he murdered the family dog.
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today in this true crime documentary, we will discuss one of the shocking family betrayal stories in which husband betrayed wife and tried to kill his 9-year-old daughter as well. On the evening of December 25, 2009, Shelley Danasuski had just finished spending Christmas with her 2 children in Manhattan, New York. In the days that followed, Shelley got ready to spend New Year's Eve with her family. But on December 31, 2009, she was discovered dead in her bathtub at the apartment complex in Dorchester Tower. The case was closed when the initial inquiry determined that Shelley's death was caused by an accident. Some investigators, however, were troubled by some details of this alleged tragedy and resolved to find out why a young, aspirational woman was discovered dead in her house. 10 years later, it would be revealed that Shelley was murdered by someone who had once professed to love her, not by accident. In one instance, Rod Kovlin became so envious that he went to tremendous measures to obtain his wife's wealth. Shelley Danasuski was 34 years old, residing in New York, and working as a financial advisor in 1998. Shelley had a gentle disposition that was hard to ignore, and her elegant aura could draw attention to herself right away. Shelley was also incredibly ambitious, which is another fact about her. After graduating from college with a degree in marketing, She began working in the financial industry in New York. Her dedication to her career and perseverance eventually made her a prosperous financial counselor in New York with a number of well-known clientele. Shelley was known for her ability to complete tasks swiftly by everyone who worked with her or had her as their financial counselor. For a woman of her age, Shelley was succeeding professionally, but her personal life was a whole other ball of mud. Shelley was in her second half of her 30s and still had not met a life partner. After making significant progress in her career, Shelley realized it was time to concentrate on her personal life and begin a family with a partner who shared her beliefs and aspirations. In the end, Shelley's search for a life companion was fulfilled by fate. She went to a gathering for Jewish singles in February 1998 at a bar called Le Bar Bat in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen. Since it was a gathering for like-minded individuals, it was the perfect opportunity for her to finally meet a life partner and put an end to her protracted search. It was love at first sight when Shelley met Roderick Coughlin, a 25-year-old male, at the event. It was actually more than that, as Shelley called her sister Eve a few hours after meeting Rod to inform her that she was en route to Las Vegas to marry Rod. The unique bond between Shelley and Rod remained, despite her sister's advice at the time to delay making such a significant life decision. The 11-year age gap between Shelley and Rod didn't worry either of them, and they became engaged a few weeks after the singles party. Rod and Shelley have shared their partner's incredible bond with their families. In September 1998, 7 months after their initial encounter, Rod Coughlin and Shelley Danasuski were married in a joyous ceremony witnessed by their loved ones. The couple welcomed their first child, a girl they called Anna, in 2000, 2 years after they were married. Rod and Shelley developed a closer bond and became inseparable over the first few years of their marriage. The couple was quite involved in their local Jewish community because they were both Jewish and Shelley had grown up in an Orthodox Jewish background. After a few years of good times, Rod and Shelley began to see that they didn't have as much in common as they had initially believed when they first met and got married in 1998. A diligent worker, Shelley continued to advance in her profession and eventually rose to the position of Senior Vice President for Private Wealth Management at UBS. Roderick, on the other hand, was the total antithesis of his wife. When he was unsuccessful in his original attempt to become a stockbroker, he chose to live off of his wife's wealth. Shelley even provided funding for a few of her husband's business endeavors because she wanted him to succeed like her, but each failed since Rod showed no interest. Sheila loved her husband, thus she was okay with him not being able to achieve the same success as her. However, when Rod became obsessed with backgammon gambling, things began to shift. After winning a few games at first, Rod made the decision to make money from it. He would travel across the nation for days at a time to play in various backgammon events. He would play the game for hours at home in order to improve his skills. However, that wasn't the only issue. Over time, Rod also began surreptitiously searching other websites and social media sites for women to date. He was so into it that he once spent a day contacting around 40 ladies on Facebook, the most of whom were backgammon players he had met at various tournaments. By this time, Rod cared more about backgammon than he did for his wife or children. In addition to making Sheila's situation worse, he had begun to have unexpected outbursts of wrath, leading his wife to suspect that he was bipolar. Sheila's troubles didn't end when she became pregnant with twins and lost both of them in an early delivery. One baby passed away while still in the womb, and the other died soon after. The couple desired another child, but the doctors informed Sheila that she would not be able to conceive again. In order to have a son named Miles, Rod and Sheila had to use an egg donor in 2006. Rod had gradually grown so poisonous that he constantly reminded Sheila that they needed to seek an egg donor to conceive their baby because of her. He continued, however, and eventually revealed to their kid that Sheila was not his original mother. Rod and Sheila's marriage was irreparably ruined in 2008, precisely 10 years after they first met and were married. The situation had become so bad that Rod even proposed an open marriage to his wife, which infuriated Sheila, an Orthodox Jew, who promptly turned down Rod's proposal. However, Rod continued his pattern of adultery and joined the Jewish dating site JDate using the fictitious identity James Early. Even Rod didn't conceal his affairs from his wife because he had become so toxic. Sheila had had enough of Rod, his infidelity, and his anger management problems by January 2009. She even expressed her fear that this would have negative consequences for her and her kids to her sister Eve. Sheila made the decision to live apart in April 2009 in order to prevent her children from being impacted by her husband's problems. However, Sheila requested that Rod move into an apartment across the hall in the same building since she didn't want the kids to be apart from their father. A month after Rod forcibly moved his belongings back into Sheila's apartment, the couple's efforts to make the new arrangement work quickly took a turn for the worse. Sheila filed for divorce in the middle of May 2009 after realizing her marriage was unsalvageable. Rod was compelled to return to the flat across the hall as a result, and the couple's life gradually began to return to normal. Sheila now gave her work her all attention and carried on with her prosperous career. She also began dating other men after she and Rod had formally split up. Her personal and professional lives were flourishing, and she was once again a contented lady. Sheila's ex-partner was not pleased with her success and, in the last years of their marriage, chose to make her life a living hell. To keep an eye on everything she did online, he planted surveillance cameras in the hallway and even infected her computer with spyware. However, he went farther and attempted to have Sheila fired by making up a complaint to her boss that she was abusing drugs and depleting their joint account. In actuality, Rod had taken out $7,200 from the account since their split, while Sheila had only taken out $800. Since Sheila's boss was already aware of the issue, Rod's attempt to have her fired failed. This infuriated Rod Kovlin, who made the decision to become even more malevolent. Rod removed the children from their mother's apartment on July 8, 2009, and failed to return them by 8 p.m., despite having unfettered access to Sheila's residence. Sheila tried calling and messaging him, but he didn't answer. Sheila made the decision to call the police because she was concerned about the safety of her kids. Rod, on the other hand, had taken the children to a Columbia Presbyterian hospital to report Sheila for sexual abuse rather than taking them sightseeing or to a theme park. But Rod's lies were soon exposed by the Child Services Administration and the doctors, and the children were brought back to Sheila at 5:30 a.m. the following day. Rod continued to insist that his made-up story was authentic despite this. He complained to the NYPD's Special Victims Unit about Sheila's fictitious abuse. However, detectives in the special unit came to the same conclusion as the physicians and ACS agents at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Rod was lying, and the investigation was closed. This decision backfired as well, as the family court judge handling Rod and Sheila's divorce case restricted his visitation rights and only let him to see his kids under formal court supervision. In addition, the court mandated that Rod give Sheila $425 in child support. He was even more enraged when he was told he didn't have the money and that he couldn't use it for backgammon gaming. When Rod choked Sheila and threatened to murder her, the rage quickly escalated into physical abuse. Sheila immediately obtained a protective order from the court because she was afraid for her life and the lives of her children. Rod had remained a part of Sheila's will until now. However, Sheila made the decision to cut out her ex-husband from her life completely and permanently on December 29, 2009, and she requested that a state attorney take Rod's name out of her will. Sheila went on a date with someone she had just met on JDate on December 30th, 2009, leaving the kids with a babysitter. She played with them for a while after her date and then put them to bed. Sheila signed into her JDate profile at 10:13 p.m. and then logged off a short while later. Sheila's 9-year-old daughter Anna woke up at 7 in the morning on December 31st, the day she was scheduled to meet with her estate attorney and finally put an end to her husband's case. She proceeded to wake her mother in her room. Sheila was not in her room, though, when Anna arrived. Then she entered the restroom and screamed as soon as she opened the door. Sheila was in a pool of blood, face down. Rod, Anna's father, rushed into their flat after Anna called him right away. After removing Sheila from the tub, Rod dialed 911 and gave her a cardiopulmonary resuscitation. First responders were already at Sheila's apartment when the police arrived, and they told them that the deceased was in the flat's back bathroom. Soon, the detectives showed up at the scene as well. Rod informed them that he thought Sheila had fallen during an early morning shower and struck her head on the bathtub. He even displayed to the investigators a cupboard above the bathtub that had some of its hinges removed. Additionally, the investigators believed that it was really an unfortunate accident. Before the officers wrapped up the investigation and notified Sheila's family of her passing, they asked a few more questions of Rod, the first adult to come into contact with Sheila's body, and Anna, who discovered her dead body. Rothermel, one of the detectives, returned to his office and reviewed the crime scene facts. Rothermel thought something was wrong since a lot of what he observed that morning didn't make sense, even if the facts suggested that Sheila's death was an accident. Rod Coughlin had told him about the slip and fall, but the angle of the pulled-off cabinet door and the body's position didn't match. Rothermel also observed that the victim's face, lips, and right arm had red scratch marks and bruises, which was out of the ordinary for someone who had just taken a shower. After following Sheila's movements from the night before, the investigator became even more interested in the reason for her death after learning of one specific fact. Sheila got a keratin treatment the day before she passed away, and she was instructed not to wash her hair for the next 72 hours. It prompted a query. Given that she was not to wash her hair for the following 3 days, why would Sheila choose to take a bath? Rod's clothing was clean when he described the incident to the investigating officer, but he had also claimed to have taken Sheila's body out of the blood-stained water. Detective Rothermel wanted to wait for the results of Sheila's autopsy before conducting a thorough forensic search of the crime scene. Unfortunately, Sheila Danaszewski's ultra-Orthodox Jewish family opposed it due to their religious convictions. Therefore, it didn't happen. Since Detective Rothermel was unable to conduct much further research after this, the case was formally ended. Everyone who knew Sheila had been horrified to learn of her passing. Some of Sheila's friends and family, though, shared Detective Rothermel's suspicions on the reason behind her passing. It was disclosed by her sister Eve that Sheila always preferred showers over baths. Stephanie Goldman, one of Sheila's acquaintances, concurred with Eve's assertion and claimed that Sheila never even took a quick bath. Many family members of Sheila Danaszewski harbored suspicions that she had been the victim of cold-blooded murder by her ex-husband, Rod Coughlin, even after her funeral. When Sheila's estate lawyer, Lance Meyer, told the family that Sheila planned to meet with him on the day of her death to remove her ex-husband from her will, the suspicion quickly became a definite belief. There was a straightforward explanation for the growing number of fingers pointing toward Rod Coughlin. If she died while he was still in her will, he would receive $5.2 million. Sheila's family went to the authorities and asked them to revisit the case and carry out their investigation in light of these terrible new facts. The two chief detectives in the case, Detectives Rothermel and Francis Brennan, told the family that since the case was officially closed, they were unable to look into Sheila's death any further. The Danasuskis were also informed by the detectives that allowing an autopsy on the victim's body was the only option to reopen the investigation. However, due to their religious convictions, that was not an option. The family took matters into their own hands and engaged Michael Swain, a private investigator, to investigate Sheila's death and Rod Kovlin's involvement in it after the police declined to assist them without an autopsy. Upon visiting Sheila's apartment, Michael Swain observed that the cabinet hinge screws had been purposefully removed, making it impossible for someone with Sheila's slender frame to tear off the hinges, even if they were falling. Additionally, he observed that the bathroom was devoid of a bath towel, which was unexpected given Rod claimed that Sheila had gone to the bathroom to take a bath. Sheila's family consented to an autopsy 2 months after she passed away. Sheila Danasuski's body was sent for an autopsy after the authorities received the court's order to exhume her body on March 1, 2010. A cracked hyoid, a frequent symptom of strangulation, was discovered in Sheila's body when the autopsy report was returned. Sheila's cause of death was reclassified from accident to homicide in April 2010 in light of the new information. To get a search warrant for her flat, the investigative team had to wait an additional 2 months. Melissa Shields, Sheila's friend, was the first to be interviewed from among those who had seen or spoken to the victim in the final hours of her life. Melissa informed the detectives that she had met Sheila just hours before she passed away and had a feeling something wasn't right. Sheila informed her friend that she thought her ex-husband was following her when she questioned her about it. Roderick Kovlin, the ex-husband of Sheila Danasuski, refused to cooperate with the authorities when it was his turn to be interviewed. He was in contact with a woman from North Carolina named Deborah Oleis, according to his phone records and email correspondence dated December 30, 2009. Deborah, a backgammon player Rod had met at a competition, was married and had 3 kids. Both of them had begun an affair outside of marriage, and Deborah had even gone to see Rod in New York. Rod and Deborah stayed up till 1:03 a.m. playing backgammon the night Sheila was killed. Before Rod went out to work on his Federation of Backgammon, Rod texted Deborah around 4 a.m. to let her know he had fallen asleep and hadn't done any work. At 4:13 a.m., Rod was captured on CCTV leaving the apartment complex. He returned a few minutes later and, in a departure from his usual antisocial behavior, offered the doorman a Snickers bar. It was estimated that Sheila passed away about 1:25 a.m. and 4:25 a.m., which was the precise window of time that Rod didn't communicate with Deborah. During the interview, Deborah only spoke positively about Rod and said nothing that would suggest that Rod was responsible for Sheila's death. Rod was unable to access the money Sheila had left him in her will because of the ongoing investigation and murder case that was brought against him in 2011. Additionally, Rod's custody fight with their maternal uncle resulted in the placement of his children with their parents. Rod's parents got into violent confrontations after learning that he had been embezzling money from the Children's College Fund. The Children's College Fund gave Rod $84,000, which he used to travel with Deborah and play backgammon in various tournaments. Rod's parents exiled him and Deborah from their home because of his escalating aggressive behavior. He was so angry that he made the decision to murder his parents in order to recoup the money that Sheila and his kids had lost. He devised several alternative plans for murder. He first considered poisoning them by having his daughter Anna mix the poison into their tea. However, he quickly abandoned this idea and made the decision to enter the house through the basement window, murder his parents, take his kids, and then burn the house down. Deborah was involved in a few of his initiatives as well. He had told her everything, but she refused to join any of them and urged Rod to abandon them as well. The police were investigating many facets of the case in an attempt to gather reliable evidence against Rod, while Rod was occupied with devising a foolproof strategy to get rid of his parents. Rod attempted to frame his daughter Anna for Sheila's death after realizing he might be on the verge of being caught. He created a fake confession in Anna's email account, claiming that she killed her mother by pushing her in the bathroom. The fictitious email claims that Anna and Sheila argued the night before Sheila passed away over her going on dates. By 2014, Deborah had grown frightened of Rod as well, and the two began to drift apart. Deborah eventually called the police and revealed everything she knew about Rod and her plans throughout the years. Thus, Rod's decision to end their relationship was a grave error. On November 1, 2015, Rod Kovlin was taken into custody by the police since they now had sufficient evidence against him. 2 months before the court-imposed 6-year wait period that would have allowed him to access Shelley's $5.2 million ended, the arrest was made. In addition to her testimony, Deborah produced hard drives with information from Rod's technological devices, which showed that Rod had murdered his wife in order to obtain custody of the kids. Rod Kovlin's trial started in 2019 after he was charged with second-degree murder in 2016. At the Manhattan Supreme Court in New York, a 12-member jury heard testimony. According to the prosecution, Rod had always intended to get rid of Shelley. The question was only when. Additionally, the prosecution contended that Rod Kovlin was the only one with a motive to kill Shelley Danasuski, even though all of the evidence against him was circumstantial. One of the main witnesses in Rod's ex-girlfriend case, Patricia Swenson, testified in court that Rod became quite irate when discussing his ex-wife on a trip in August 2009. She added that he made numerous statements about wanting to kill Shelley throughout that trip. More and more incriminating evidence against Rod was shown to the court as the trial went on. At the end of the 8-week trial, the jury found Rod Kovlin guilty of killing his ex-wife, Sheila Danasuski, despite his attorney's efforts to prove his innocence. Roderick Kovlin was sentenced by the court on April 10, 2019, to 25 years to life in prison for the murder of his ex-wife. Later, Rod Kovlin filed an appeal against the court's ruling, but it was denied. He is presently incarcerated at New York's Attica Correctional Facility.
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Rhea Lawrence was a devoted mother to her son, Ethan, sharing custody with her ex-husband, Mark Lawrence. Their separation in 2013 marked the beginning of a transformative chapter in Rhea's life. Following her divorce, she felt a renewed sense of hope and was eager to explore the dating world once again, though she quickly discovered that this landscape had changed dramatically. The rise of online dating was something Rhea had to grapple with. It was no longer about meeting someone at a cafe or through mutual friends. Instead, she found herself browsing profiles on a popular dating site, Match.com, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. After setting up her profile, she immersed herself in the vast pool of potential partners, but most of them didn't resonate with her until she came across Nathan Sanders. Nathan, like Rhea, had recently ended a long-term marriage and was ready to embark on a new adventure. Their initial conversations were electric. They exchanged phone calls, text messages, and emails, each interaction drawing them closer together. Over the course of several months, they built a strong emotional bond, sharing dreams, aspirations, and the trials of single parenthood. In a bold move that highlighted the depth of their connection, Nathan decided to relocate to Orlando, Florida, to be nearer to Rhea and Ethan. The decision marked a significant step forward in their relationship, and they both felt a magnetic pull toward each other that was impossible to ignore. Despite her blossoming romance with Nathan, Rhea's commitment to her son remained unwavering. She was diligent about balancing her new relationship with her parental responsibilities, ensuring that Ethan felt secure and loved. As they moved forward, the three of them settled into a routine that emphasized family first. In 2015, Rhea and Nathan made the decision to purchase a home together in the upscale Delaney Park neighborhood, a place known for its beautiful parks and excellent schools. Delaney Park was a picturesque suburb that appealed to families looking for a safe and welcoming environment. The community thrived with tree-lined streets, well-kept gardens, and an active neighborhood association. Rhea and Nathan were thrilled to become part of this vibrant community, and they purchased a lovely house for $600,000, paying in cash and placing it in a trust that included both of their names. Their new home, a sprawling 4,000-square-foot property, came equipped with a pool, a spacious garage, and an apartment above the garage that Rhea decided to use as her workspace. This living arrangement allowed her to maintain her creative pursuits while being close to her family. Although they were excited to start this new chapter, they soon realized that some aspects of the house didn't meet their expectations. The upstairs bedrooms were cramped and poorly designed, and it became clear that significant renovations were necessary to turn their dream home into a reality. Fueled by her passion for interior design and home improvement, Rhea took the lead on this project, determined to transform their house into the perfect family haven. They hired a team of skilled contractors to embark on a renovation that would radically reconfigure the upstairs space. As the project unfolded, Rhea temporarily moved into the garage apartment, allowing her to maintain her daily routine and provide a dedicated space for her work. Meanwhile, Nathan adapted to life in a makeshift space in the main house, spending quality time with their dogs and embracing the chaos of the renovation. As the months passed, the renovations took on a life of their own. Nathan became increasingly engrossed in the process, pouring his heart and soul into overseeing the work. The project shifted from being a simple home improvement endeavor to an all-consuming passion. Each day, he worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail was attended to, and the house slowly began to transform. However, by 2018, nearly 3 years into the renovation, progress seemed stalled. The once promising project was now a shell of its former self, with the interiors completely gutted. Frustrated and desperate for a solution, Nathan reached out to a local home renovator known for their popular reality television series, Zombie House Flippers. The producers were intrigued by the couple's story and agreed to feature their home in an upcoming episode. This partnership seemed like a promising way to revitalize the renovation process, bringing both excitement and potential financial support. However, amid the whirlwind of filming and renovations, Rhea and Nathan decided to marry in a private ceremony in 2017, a decision they kept under wraps, even from their closest family and friends. Despite Rhea's generally private nature, this secret marriage was in line with her desire for discretion in her personal life. By mid-April 2018, as the filming for Zombie House Flippers loomed closer, tensions began to rise between Rhea and Nathan. While Nathan was enthusiastic about the project, Rhea appeared more hesitant and apprehensive, seemingly going along with it to support her husband. The strain on their relationship became palpable. Rhea had invested substantial funds into the renovations, yet she felt sidelined, her name missing from the trust that owned their home. Nathan had promised to rectify this but failed to do so, leading to growing resentment on Rhea's part. Then came the fateful day, April 24th, 2018. At 3:51 p.m., Nathan called 911, his voice laced with panic as he reported that he had found Rhea unconscious in their bathtub. The dispatcher could hear his frantic cries as he explained the situation. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered Rhea's lifeless body, and the scene quickly turned into a crime investigation. As detectives began to piece together the events leading to Rhea's death, Nathan recounted the day's occurrences. He claimed that the morning had started ordinarily. Rhea awoke between 7 and 7:30 a.m. He stated that he left for a walk around 9:30 a.m., assuming Rhea was relaxing at home. When he returned, he took measurements for the ongoing renovations, before leaving again to take their dogs to a local park. Upon returning home, he said he heard water running in the bathroom, and upon entering found Rhea submerged in the tub. Nathan's account was filled with emotional turmoil, but the detectives began to notice inconsistencies. For instance, there were no signs of water on the floor, which would typically be present if he had genuinely attempted to rescue her. Investigators noted bruising on Rhea's body that contradicted Nathan's story of an accidental drowning. An autopsy later confirmed that Rhea had died from blunt force trauma and strangulation, officially ruling her death a homicide. As detectives scrutinized the evidence, Nathan's narrative began to unravel. The investigation uncovered troubling details about Rhea's life, including a significant life insurance policy that named Nathan as the beneficiary. Tensions intensified as detectives began questioning Nathan about the nature of their relationship and whether the ongoing renovations had contributed to their domestic strife. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered Rhea's concerns regarding Nathan's behavior. Friends and family described a controlling man who manipulated Rhea's emotions, even going so far as to hide her son Ethan's toys, only to return them when it suited him. This psychological manipulation added layers to the narrative that the detectives began to explore. With every piece of evidence, the suspicion around Nathan grew stronger. Investigators seized their computers and discovered notes on Rhea's laptop detailing her unhappiness in the marriage. She had described Nathan as cheap and controlling, lamenting how he never paid for their outings and how his behavior made her feel lonely and isolated. Further digging revealed that Rhea had experienced significant health issues in the months leading up to her death, echoing the concerns expressed by those who knew her. Detectives speculated about the possibility of Nathan poisoning Rhea, although toxicology tests failed to reveal any conclusive evidence. As investigators connected the dots, they learned about Nathan's previous marriage, which had ended under similarly mysterious circumstances. His first wife, Clara, had suffered from health issues that remained unexplained even after their separation. The parallels raised alarm bells, prompting detectives to interview Clara to glean more information about Nathan's past behavior. During their conversation, Clara expressed that her health problems began shortly after they married and that she often felt unwell, leading her to question whether Nathan had any role in her decline. Although Clara vehemently denied any notion of intentional harm, the detectives couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play. As the investigation continued, detectives received a tip from an employee at Club Orlando, a private men's spa where Nathan reportedly held multiple memberships. They learned that Nathan frequented the establishment and had been seen engaging in sexual activities with other men. This information posed a new angle. Could Rhea have discovered Nathan's secret and threatened to expose him? By the time forensic results came back, evidence was mounting against Nathan. Rhea's DNA was found beneath his fingernails, contradicting his claim that she fell into the tub. The lack of any defensive wounds on Rhea suggested she had been caught off guard, possibly during a moment of vulnerability. On August 29, 2018, Nathan was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The news sent shockwaves through their community, leaving friends and family grappling with disbelief. Nathan maintained his innocence, yet the evidence was overwhelming. Investigators continued to explore every lead, even considering other suspects, including Mark, Rhea's ex-husband. However, Mark was quickly ruled out after providing a solid alibi. The case against Nathan grew stronger as detectives served search warrants on various properties associated with him. Inside Nathan's mother's home, they discovered Rhea's missing engagement ring, further solidifying their case against him. In July 2019, a jailhouse informant came forward, claiming that Nathan had confessed to him during a conversation about Rhea's death. This turned the tide of public opinion against Nathan, making it nearly impossible for him to escape the mounting allegations. As Nathan awaited trial, Rhea's family honored her memory, ensuring that her legacy would not be forgotten. They organized memorials and raised awareness about domestic abuse, vowing to advocate for other women who might find themselves in similar situations. After a protracted trial, Nathan was convicted of first-degree murder on April 30, 2020, and subsequently sentenced to life in prison without parole. His conviction was a bittersweet victory for Rhea's family, a reminder of the life cut short and the love that could have blossomed anew. Ethan, now growing into a resilient young man, carried his mother's spirit with him. Rhea's story became a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder to seek love and happiness while remaining vigilant about the complexities of relationships. In the years that followed, Ethan often spoke about his mother with pride, cherishing the memories they shared and the lessons she imparted. Though the journey was fraught with sorrow, Rhea's legacy continued to inspire those around her, turning tragedy into a catalyst for change and empowerment. As he matured, Ethan promised to honor his mother's life by advocating for others who suffered in silence, embodying Ria's spirit of courage and resilience. He became an activist for domestic violence awareness, reminding others that love should never be a cage but a liberating force that uplifts and strengthens. Ria's story, marked by love, loss, and redemption, ultimately served as a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles. In the shadows of tragedy, a new narrative emerged, one that underscored the importance of self-love, the power of resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son.
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub, where we bring you the most compelling and chilling true crime documentaries. In today's gripping story, we uncover the shocking tale of a husband's deadly secret that was exposed, unraveling a seemingly perfect marriage. This marriage betrayal goes beyond just an affair. It's a journey of heartbreak, deception, and the painful moment when a wife takes the power back. Watch as the truth comes to light and the consequences of betrayal unfold in this emotional true crime documentary. Be sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more gripping stories from the world of true crime. In the peaceful Maryland suburbs, Maria Jenkins had long been seen as the ideal mother and wife. She sacrificed everything to provide a secure, caring home for her husband, Richard, and their 2 kids. But Maria had been keeping a terrible secret beneath the perfect facade of their family life. Her spouse was unfaithful. Months had passed since she learned of the affair, and although she had thought about pardoning him for the benefit of their kids, it was now impossible. Richard showed no remorse, and Maria was on the verge of openly ending it. Maria Jenkins had always been the kind of woman who thought that family was strong. She grew up in a small town and had seen her parents' marriage withstand life's ups and downs, and she aspired to do the same for herself. She had once heard her mother, a gentle but strong woman, say that love was about sticking together through the good times as well as the bad. Maria's conception of marriage had been molded by those words, and she had held fast to that conviction for a very long time, even as her own life started to fall apart. Shortly after graduating from college in the late 1990s, she met Richard. He promised her a life full of adventure and love, and he was charming and ambitious. That promise appeared to be being kept for years. They created a life that Maria loved, purchased a house in Maryland, and had 2 lovely children. While Richard put in long hours at work to support his children, Sophie and Liam, she became a stay-at-home mom and spent her time with them. Maria believed that she was the cornerstone of their family, keeping everything together so that their kids could be raised in a secure and caring setting. However, things evolved over time. Maria became aware of minor changes in Richard's conduct around 2011. He appeared to be more preoccupied, and occasionally he would arrive home late while wearing a subtle scent of a perfume that wasn't hers. She initially tried to ignore it, dismissing it as either her vivid imagination or the stress of his job. She had never had any cause to question Richard's loyalty, after all. He was an excellent parent to their children. Even if their marriage wasn't flawless, Maria believed they were a good couple. Then it was more difficult to disregard the signs. He kept his phone near to him like a secret and was using it more and more. He would frequently turn away from her when they went to bed and spend the rest of the night browsing through messages. Their discussions had become tense and more superficial than they had ever been. A chilly distance had taken the place of the intimacy that had once flowed so freely between them. Maria was unable to fully explain. On January 5, 2012, everything was different. Maria had been attempting to distract herself from the persistent sense that something was amiss by performing the routine housework. She discovered a credit card bill that was significantly larger than usual while going through the mail. She was drawn in by curiosity and, against her better judgment, chose to read the statements. She discovered the hotel receipts at that point. She scanned the charges, her hands shaking. They lasted more than one night. Over the past few months, Richard had no need to be at the same hotel where several transactions had taken place. Slowly, the truth of what was happening set in. Maria, however, took some time to act. She was aware that confronting him would require more than just a gut instinct or some dubious accusations. Over the next few weeks, Maria started to look into it in private. In order to avoid leaving any evidence of her searches, she examined his phone while he was asleep. She discovered messages, some of which validated her fears. Richard had a new girlfriend. Like a tidal wave, the pain struck her. She did not, however, confront him. Rather, she started gathering evidence. Pictures showing him leaving their home at strange hours, discussions he had with the woman, and even a few instances where he made the mistake of leaving work early. When February finally arrived, Maria had ample evidence. However, she remained silent for a short while longer since she was afraid of ruining their family. At least the Richard she had known was still the one she loved. She wished that perhaps, just possibly, he would change his mind and see what he was doing before it was too late, and she didn't want to destroy their home. After weeks of restless nights and mounting annoyance, Maria made the decision to face him on February 15th. The only sound in the house was the slight buzz of the heater as it forced warmth through the vents. The children had gone to bed. As Maria walked toward Richard, who was seated in the living room, unaware of what was about to happen, her heart thumped in her chest. When she opened her mouth to speak, the words came out clumsily, even though she had practiced the exchange 1,000 times in her mind. Richard's response was exactly what she had feared. He initially disputed it. He asserted that she was exaggerating, that nothing was happening, and that he had been meeting with clients or working late. However, once Maria presented the facts she had collected, the truth could not be avoided. He sobbed and pleaded for forgiveness, citing life stresses and work-related stress. Though she was upset, Maria had a glimmer of optimism that perhaps this was the wake-up call he needed. However, things just became worse. Over the next few weeks, Richard's perspective changed. He grew aloof and defensive rather than trying to mend their marriage. He accused her of pushing him away when Maria brought it up again, looking for some indication of regret. He accused her of not paying enough attention to him since she was too preoccupied with the children. By the third encounter, Richard's lack of remorse was evident. He had no intention of stopping. He was now making Maria feel as though she was the issue. Maria struggled with herself for weeks. Her thoughts kept returning to the disagreements, the betrayal, and her children's future, making it impossible for her to fall asleep. She didn't want to split up her family because Sophie and Liam were everything to her. But she could always see the dishonesty, the lack of regret, and the lies in Richard's eyes. The 3rd of March was the tipping point. Like any other day, Maria had been at the grocery store running errands. Sophie, however, rushed up to her when she got home and inquired about an odd object she had seen earlier. Richard had introduced Lisa, another lady, into their home while Maria was abroad. 6-year-old Sophie had witnessed them cuddling and sitting too close in the living room. Maria was heartbroken by the question's innocence. Even though her daughter didn't comprehend what was going on, the picture was enough to ruin Maria's hopes of keeping her marriage intact. A mistake was no longer at issue here. By taking his affair into their house and their children's lives, Richard had gone too far. As Maria lay awake in bed that night, she understood that the only way to move forward was to come up with a plan. She would collect as much proof as she could, and she would reveal him for what he really was when the moment was perfect. No further second chances would be given. For Richard Jenkins, this marked the start of the end. Maria Jenkins was at her breaking point by the beginning of March. The treachery that she had attempted to forgive had now transformed into something more profound, an unwavering determination to take back her life. She had given up everything for years in order to create a family, a home, and a life she believed to be secure. But that existence had become a falsehood because of Richard, the guy she had once trusted. He didn't merely harm her anymore. The saddest part was that he had taken his betrayal into their children's life and degraded their home. Maria was not able to forgive that. Maria sat calmly at the kitchen table on the evening of March 6th while Richard departed for yet another business trip. Her mind whirled while her hands held her coffee cup. She stopped crying. She had cried as much as she possibly could. She had regained her composure and determination. She had resolved to obtain indisputable evidence that would not only expose Richard but also guarantee his demise. Her thoughts were already focused on the annual family reunion, which would serve as a unifying factor. That would be the ideal opportunity to tell the truth. Maria had a systematic plan. She bought tiny hidden cameras online that could be passed off as commonplace items. One camera was placed inside a picture frame in the living room, while the other was carefully hidden into a decorative clock on the dresser in the bedroom. In order to capture everything without bringing attention to herself, she made sure that the angles were ideal. There would be no chance of being found out. Every second Richard and Lisa spent together in their house would be captured on camera. Together with the cameras, Maria surreptitiously put a voice recorder in Richard's briefcase that would start when he made a sound, recording every hushed word and every damning phone call. By now, she was familiar with his routine. Richard was irresponsible, assuming Maria had had enough of him. Her silence, in his opinion, indicated that she had come to terms with his adultery. He was completely mistaken. Maria emotionally separated from Richard during the next few weeks. She spent more time with the kids and stopped attempting to talk to him. She made herself scarce so that he might continue his affair without hindrance. Her absence fueled his conceit, and Richard became more brazen in his actions every day. In the belief that no one would ever discover, Maria watched in silence as he repeatedly brought Lisa into their house. However, the cameras recorded everything they did and said as soon as they stepped inside the residence. Maria possessed an expanding collection of audio recordings and video footage that depicted a guy who had not only deceived his wife but also destroyed the foundation of their marriage. She had both a profound sense of sadness and enlightenment. She would expose him for her own sake and the benefit of her children, not for retaliation. She could not allow kids to grow up in a lie-based home. The Jenkins family reunion preparations were well underway as June drew near. This year was no exception to the annual gathering that Richard's parents had been holding at their expansive estate on the borders of Maryland. On July 4th, a day full of games, picnics, and family customs, the reunion was scheduled. Richard's siblings, their spouses, relatives, nieces, nephews, and everyone else would be present. For Richard, it was an opportunity to portray himself as the prosperous guy with the ideal family, as well as a time to rekindle old memories and commemorate family history. Maria, however, had a different perspective. She saw it as her chance to reveal the truth to Richard's most important audience. She pretended to be the loyal wife and played along with the preparations, but on the inside, she was getting ready for something much more significant. She had gathered all the evidence by now. She had text messages from Richard's phone, audio recordings, and hours of video that all pointed to his affair with Lisa. Denial would not be an option. Maria made the decision that everything will be revealed during the reunion. The silence had been enough for her. She had collected enough evidence to guarantee that no one would be left in the dark when the truth was revealed. In addition to exposing Richard's treachery, she would ensure that he suffered the consequences of his conduct in front of those who believed they knew him the best. The smell of freshly cut grass filled the air on the sunny and beautiful morning of July 4th. The reunion was held at Richard's parents' house, which was the ideal location. A large backyard with picnic tables prepared for the feast, huge oak trees offering shade, and happy kids running around. Despite her pulse pounding with excitement, Maria's face remained neutral as she arrived with Richard and the children. The USB drive, which had a meticulously edited collection of the audio and movies she had gathered over the previous few months, was already ready. As anticipated, the day started out with stories being told, laughter, and the aroma of barbecue filling the air. Unaware that the time was running out on his facade, Richard acted as the devoted father and prosperous businessman, socializing with his family. Maria remained near their kids, keeping a tight eye on everything while keeping her head clear and concentrated. She needed to time this just so. Maria realized the time had come as the sun started to drop and the family came inside for their customary slideshow. All of Richard's family members were seated comfortably in the living room, anticipating the annual collection of family recollections. Despite feeling her heart race, Maria remained calm. While Richard's father connected the laptop to the screen and set up the projector, she stood silently in the back. Maria took action as soon as the room was dark and everyone's eyes were fixed on the screen. Under the pretense of changing the settings, she went over to the laptop and silently inserted her USB drive into the port. Making sure no one saw the changeover, she sped through the files. Then she hit play with a firm hand. She had meticulously planned this, waiting for the right opportunity, and now that Richard's whole family was there would be no way out. As the projector clicked on, the room became silent. Everyone's gaze shifted to the screen as the machines recognizable were reverberated around the room. Richard's father, who always planned the reunion, nodded and grinned at Maria, believing she had prepared a special meal for the family. A tribute, maybe, but what was shown on the TV was not the joyful, contented family moments that everyone had anticipated. Rather, a startled silence descended upon the audience as the blurry video came to life. Everyone recognized Richard when he appeared on the television, but he wasn't by himself. There she was, Lisa, clearly visible. Despite its flaws, the video captured them together in the closeness of their house. Although Maria had documented every detail, the soft touches, the stolen kisses, the whispered words, Richard had thought he was safe. The room fell into oppressive quiet. Initially, nobody was able to really understand what they were seeing. Richard's carefully cultivated image over the years was shattered by the pictures on the television. After a collective gasp, the whispering started. Previously admiring faces now twisted in astonishment and bewilderment. Richard became pale and froze in his chair. Like a tidal wave, the weight of what was happening fell over him. His legs felt weak under him as he attempted to stand. Realizing too late that he had underestimated Maria, he glanced at her in panic. He had assumed that she would remain mute, that her desire for a stable family and her love for the kids would prevent her from speaking again. However, Maria had discovered her voice, and what she had started could not be stopped. In a desperate attempt to halt the movie, Richard jumped out of his chair and ran toward the laptop as it continued. Maria, however, had placed herself between the screen and him. Her eyes were icy and unforgiving as she stood erect, obstructing him. She didn't have to say anything. He knew that this was far from over just by her presence. The video continued, cutting to the sound recordings she had painstakingly gathered. Unaware that every word he spoke was being recorded, Richard's voice filled the room as he charmed Lisa and made promises. Every second that went by, the consequences of his actions weighed more heavily on him. He had believed that he was in charge of everything, but Maria had completely outperformed him. The room's mood changed from astonishment to disdain. Once his staunchest defenders, Richard's family now regarded him with shame and incredulity. His parents were unable to talk or even look at their son as they sat rigidly. His siblings looked at one another in an attempt to make sense of the difference between the man they believed they knew and the one who was shown on the screen. In a flash of wrath, Richard grabbed at Maria, intending to silence her, but his older brother James got up. James, however, was quicker and intervened to restrain Richard. Richard could not shake the feeling that everything was unraveling, even in his rage. Maria was unervingly calm. Even as Richard's world fell apart around him, Mary stayed composed because she had foreseen every response and every consequence. Maria grabbed into her suitcase as the final tape came to a close and the room fell silent again. She took out the divorce papers with the same steady hand. Knowing that this day would arrive, she had been preparing them for weeks. She tossed them at Richard's feet without saying a word. She was explicit in her wording. Richard would lose half of what they had created together, and she would be granted full custody of the kids. There was no place for him to dispute, no room for discussion. The proof was indisputable, and there was no going back now. Richard's following 2 weeks turned into a nightmare. His actions' repercussions started to become clearer to him more quickly than he could comprehend. Armed with indisputable proof, Maria proceeded quickly through the court system. Richard made feeble and unsuccessful attempts to fight for custody in court. He had no protection. After seeing hours of video and audio recordings, the judge was forced to take Maria's side. The court granted Maria full custody of the children on August 15, 2012. In addition to being required to pay monthly child support, Richard would forfeit half of their assets. The judge was stern and threatened to put him in jail if he didn't make the payment. His previously secure and well-respected life had entirely collapsed. Richard's role within the family also deteriorated throughout the course of the weeks. His parents, who had always been his strongest supporters, were no longer able to view him in the same light. Disgusted by the event that had upended their family, his siblings turned away. Once a guy with everything, Richard was now alone and lonely. Despite the anguish of the process, Maria felt a sense of release. She had dedicated years to being the ideal wife, putting their family's needs ahead of her own happiness. But she was free now. Free from the deceit, the lies, and the heartache that never stops. She went on, concentrating on her kids and creating a new life for them. In contrast, Richard descended into self-destruction. He had lost everything because of the affair. His dignity, his family, and his reputation. He was reminded of the day he lost everything each month when he paid the court-mandated child maintenance. He was plagued by resentment and found it difficult to return to his previous way of life. Maria, however, had moved on. With her kids on her side and the community behind her, she found strength in the very people Richard had ignored. Maria had taken back her life, but the wounds of the past would never go away. She didn't have to be the ideal wife anymore. At last, she could be herself. The memories of that day would haunt Richard for the rest of his life, as he was forced to deal with the fallout from his decisions. The world was made aware of his lies. What had appeared to be a harmonious family facade descended into a controversy that would follow Richard for the rest of his life. The reunion would be remembered for treachery and the terrible results of one man's infidelity rather than for joy. Maria came out stronger, freed from the bonds of a loveless marriage, and at last prepared to take back her life, even though the anguish persisted.
The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. In this true crime documentary, we will explore another one of the most shocking marriage betrayal stories, where a husband betrayed wife in a devastating way. The body of 29-year-old Rebecca Keller was found dead in a lavish mansion on a prestigious Fijian island in March 2013. What started off as an idyllic honeymoon descended into a terrifying catastrophe. The subsequent inquiry uncovered the horrific disintegration of Rebecca's marriage to her husband, 32-year-old Daniel Keller, a man whose rage and jealousy would result in unimaginable acts of violence. 3 years prior, in 2010, their journey started when a brief romance drew them into a relationship that appeared ideal on the surface but had deadly flaws. For the employees of a prestigious luxury resort in Fiji, the day started off like any other on March 10, 2013. The sky was a perfect shade of blue, the air was warm, and couples strolled hand in hand down the immaculate beaches. Before a 29-year-old newlywed who was staying in one of the resort's most secluded villas with her husband, Daniel, broke up the tranquility, the morning was picture perfect. Although their interactions occasionally suggested strain beneath the surface, the couple had been the talk of the staff. They were a beautiful couple who seemed to be genuinely in love. But the crew started to notice anything strange that morning. They had planned an opulent trip to highlight the best of the islands, but Daniel had failed to show up. No one picked up when the hotel concierge contacted their villa to see how the couple was doing. Rebecca was usually punctual and kind, so this was uncommon. To look into it, a housekeeper was dispatched to the estate. It was a terrifying scene inside. The body of Rebecca was found on the chilly marble floor in the bedroom. Her face was battered and swollen, and her forehead was covered with dried blood. The cuts indicated that her skull had been struck several times. Nearby was a broken bottle of champagne that was still bloody. The act's ferocity was made all the more startling by the stark juxtaposition of crimson with the villa's exquisite furniture and white linens. Rebecca's arms and torso were covered with bruises, some recent and some older, suggesting a history of violence that had gone unreported. The Fijian police were alerted right away by the staff, and they swiftly arrived and started their investigation. The plot was already taking shape with sad clarity by March 11, 2013. 32-year-old Daniel Keller was brought in for interrogation. His clothes were wrinkled and slightly soiled with what looked like blood, and he had been discovered slouched on a sofa in the living room of the property. He frequently attributed his mental state to heavy drinking and claimed to have no memory of the prior evening. Hotel employees confirmed that Daniel had, in fact, taken a heavy drink at the resort bar the night before. He was characterized by witnesses as anxious and combative, especially with Rebecca. Late into the night, the pair was spotted fighting at the bar. Employees remembered Rebecca's efforts to soothe Daniel, her calm, low voice contrasting with his piercing, angry tone. He had accused her of focusing too much on an elderly man who had been sitting close to their table. Rebecca comforted him, but Daniel seemed to become more irate. The dispute overflowed onto the resort's outside lounge area, where Daniel was seen violently seizing Rebecca by the arm as she attempted to leave, according to security footage that the police later examined. Despite being largely hidden by shadows in the poor video, her face appeared tense, and her body language was guarded. The inquiry turned up further information. Daniel started to have his claims of memory loss refuted by forensic evidence. His fingerprints were discovered on the bloody neck of the champagne bottle, which is thought to have been the weapon that killed Rebecca. Analysts saw that the bottle had broken due to the force of the strikes, leaving pieces lodged in Rebecca's injuries. The degree of violence was too great to be explained by an unintentional or intoxicated outburst. The villa itself provided more hints. Patterns of blood spatter suggested a struggle had occurred close to the bed. It's likely that Rebecca Ha was trapped there with no way out. In sharp contrast to the tranquil vista of the ocean outside the villa's huge windows, a path of broken glass, a toppled lamp, and ripped linens implied turmoil. It was hard to overlook Daniel Keller's predicament by March 20, 2013. Crucial evidence was provided by CCTV footage taken the night of the event. Around midnight, it showed Daniel pulling Rebecca back to the villa, her head dropping as if she was trying to fight but lacked the power to do so. The pair had not reconciled when they returned together, according to witnesses in the pub. Shortly later, staff said they heard muffled shouting coming from the property, but no one had stepped in, thinking it was simply another argument. Fijian authorities officially accused Daniel Keller with Rebecca Keller's murder based on these pieces of evidence: the fingerprints, the CCTV footage, and the forensic results. The first step in determining the true events of that tragic night was his arrest. However, there were still unanswered issues even after he was placed under arrest. How could a honeymoon transform from a dream to a horror so fast? What had stoked the anger that led to this violent act? And what secrets might remain in the lives of the couple who appeared to be so ideal to the outer world? Somewhere among the evidence were the answers, just waiting to be discovered. The terrible truth of Rebecca Keller's passing, however, was all that was left for the time being. A tragedy that had permanently damaged her family, the resort employees, and the idyllic Fijian paradise. Whenever Rebecca Keller walked into a room, she had a radiant presence. She was the kind of lady who made an impression, not because she was attention-seeking, but because she exuded a creative and pleasant demeanor that put others at ease. Rebecca was a marketing executive who was passionate about her work and always full of fresh ideas. She thrived on interacting with people. According to her acquaintances, she was a dreamer who believed that there were endless possibilities in the world. It came as no surprise that she and Daniel Keller clicked right away when they met at a networking event 3 years prior. Daniel was an affable man who had a knack for leaving an impression. He was a prosperous and self-assured real estate entrepreneur who captivated everyone with his good looks and wit. His drive and his ability to make her feel important were what drew Rebecca in. They were soon inseparable. The whirlwind courtship, full of extravagant gestures and promises of eternity, felt to Rebecca like the love story she had always dreamed about. Although it wasn't always apparent, Daniel had a darker side. Beneath the charm, there were times when he lost his temper, frequently over the tiniest things, and it was piercing and unforgiving. He attempted to hide his intense jealousy with humor or justifications. Although not consistent, his drinking occasionally drove his emotions to risky heights. Rebecca fell completely in love with Daniel in spite of these warning signs. She ignored her mounting worries because she had faith in his and their combined abilities. She immediately answered yes when Daniel proposed to her in Paris under the Eiffel Tower's radiance. Like something from a love film, the moment was picture perfect. However, in the months that followed, Flaws in their ostensibly ideal relationship started to appear. Instead of bringing happiness, the wedding preparations became a cause of stress. Daniel fought with Rebecca about insignificant things like seating maps and flower arrangements because he insisted on having control over even the tiniest details. Rebecca expressed her concerns about his domineering conduct to her close friends, although she frequently minimized them. She assured herself that it was simply the strain of organizing a large celebration and that after the wedding, everything will be better. And for a while, it did in some respects. Their wedding was a lavish event that left attendees in awe of their apparent love for one another. Rebecca held on to the hope that a fresh chapter was actually beginning. The strain that had hampered their involvement would no longer exist. Rebecca was giddy with anticipation on March 5, 2013, when they took off for Fiji. She was determined to make their honeymoon, the trip of a lifetime, one to remember. That dream appeared to be fulfilled in the initial days. Situated in a remote area of the island, the resort was breathtaking, featuring pristine waters and sunsets that adorned the sky with vibrant shades of pink and orange. Rebecca posted pictures of them exploring the island, having candlelight meals, and laughing on the beach on social media. The Kellers seemed like they were having the ideal honeymoon to everyone outside. The perfection, however, was a front. Tensions were seething under the surface. Later, resort employees recounted incidents that suggested trouble. Suddenly, Daniel's attitude may change, transforming what should have been lovely occasions into awkward, quiet meals or hushed disagreements. Rebecca was seen by witnesses attempting to soothe him during his outbursts by using a calming tone. As if she didn't want to cause a commotion, she always seemed to accept responsibility for any argument and dismiss it with a slight smile. By March 9, 2013, the fissures were more extensive. The couple spent that evening at the resort bar, a lively gathering place for honeymooners to mingle and exchange tales of their travels. Ever the social butterfly, Rebecca engaged an older man sitting close in light chat. It appeared to be a straightforward, friendly discussion to everyone seeing. Daniel, however, didn't think so. Already simmering beneath the surface, his jealousy exploded. The bar's vibe changed. As Daniel's voice became louder and his gestures more pointed, staff and guests were aware of the couple's stress. Leaning in close as if to keep their chat private, Rebecca attempted to reason with him, but he was unable to control his rage. Staff eventually had to step in and gently urge Daniel to go back to their villa so he could calm down. The couple's exit from the pub was seen on the resort's CCTV cameras as the evening drew on. Daniel was seen in the video leading Rebecca away while maintaining a firm hold on her arm. Her posture was stiff, her steps hesitant, but she did not resist. Rebecca was last seen alive at that time. The sun rose over Fiji the following morning, bathing the serene resort in its golden glow. However, something unimaginable had happened inside their villa. The guy she had thought would be her eternal love would soon be at the focus of an inquiry that would expose the evil hiding behind their flawless facade, and Rebecca Keller, the intelligent, imaginative woman who had once dreamed of a storybook romance, would never wake up again. Anger, fear, and desperation were all evident in the events that transpired on the evening of March 9, 2013, and the early hours of March 10, 2013. The horrific last minutes of Rebecca Keller's life, a series of violent events that exposed the full scope of Daniel Keller's internal conflict, were pieced together by forensic evidence. Like many nights on their honeymoon, it had started at the villa, but the tension from their fight at the bar had followed them back. Rebecca withdrew into the bedroom, perhaps fatigued and attempting to avoid more confrontation. She eventually took cover in the bathroom, locking the door after herself. Later, forensic specialists discovered dents and scratches surrounding the door handle, which were unmistakable indications of an attempt to pry it open. Daniel broke the door down in a fit of wrath, splintering the wood near the lock. The events that followed were both tragic and vicious. Daniel's rage became unmanageable. In his hands, a bottle of champagne, likely intended for a love toast, became a weapon. According to the investigation, he hit Rebecca so hard that the bottle broke as it hit her, leaving glass fragments all over the restroom floor. Analysis of blood splatter revealed a disturbing account of the assault. Patterns on the floor and walls revealed Rebecca's desperate attempts to defend herself from the blows, but she was unable to do so. Rebecca was hit more than once. She was probably startled by the initial punch, making her open to the subsequent blows. Daniel's anger appeared to be focused and unyielding based on the force, angle, and impact. Later, forensic specialists saw that the extent of her injuries suggested she had crumpled against the chilly bathroom floor tiles after a few hits. She had been fatally traumatized, as evidenced by the pooling of blood around her skull. Amid the confusion, the broken champagne bottle was lying with blood on its sharp edges. Tiny glass fragments were discovered embedded in Rebecca's skin, serving as a heartbreaking reminder of the abuse she had to undergo. Items from the bathroom were scattered about her, including a ripped shower curtain and a knocked-over soap dish, suggesting a short but fierce struggle. Investigators learned more about the man responsible for the brutality as they pieced together the scene. Although Daniel Keller's life had always appeared to be successful and well-maintained, he was actually burdened by a difficult past. According to psychological studies, Daniel had been raised in an unstable home. He had a strong fear of rejection because of his father, who was a strong and frequently violent character. Daniel had to deal with a tumultuous atmosphere because his mother, although caring in her own way, had battled with her own mental health. Those closest to Daniel, including former partners, had occasionally seen a peek of the darker side of his nature, but as he grew older, he learned to conceal his concerns with charm and confidence. Unrestrained rage, possessiveness, and a need for control were characteristics that frequently emerged under stressful or conflictual situations. Daniel had never used violence before, but his incapacity to handle emotions of betrayal or inadequacy had always been a warning sign. Daniel's fury that night was not premeditated, according to the inquiry into Rebecca's death. This was the result of years of unresolved anger and control issues rather than a premeditated act of violence. Rebecca's attempt to hide in the restroom probably caused a sense of rejection that Daniel could not stand. He saw her closing the door as a sign of disobedience and a threat to his power. Even he might not have predicted how the storm of emotions, jealousy, rejection, and anger exploded. The magnitude of what had transpired started to dawn on everyone when the fighting subsided and the villa was quiet. However, it was too late. In the same location where they had come to celebrate their love, Rebecca, the lady who had once thought Daniel had the capacity for virtue, lay dead. The elegantly designed bathroom, which overlooked the tranquil seas of Fiji, had been turned into a crime scene. Investigators were faced with challenging questions due to the psychological intricacy of Daniel's behavior. How could such a successful and charming man be harboring such evil? How could a relationship that started out with promise and love have descended into such horrific violence? Rebecca's death was the tragic culmination of a lifetime of unresolved emotions and unregulated behaviors, not only the result of Daniel's actions that evening. It became evident that Rebecca's death was more than a temporary loss of control when the specifics of that night came to light. It was the terrible result of a man who was unwilling to face his inner demons, and whose fury destroyed the very person he professed to love. Everyone who knew Rebecca would be haunted by the heartbreaking and horrific story the evidence portrayed, leaving everyone wondering how such a bright light could be put out so viciously. 1.5 years after Rebecca's passing, on October 15, 2014, Daniel Keller's trial got underway. By that point, the case had already captured the attention of the world's media, which covered every aspect of it. The public was enthralled with the notion of a paradisiacal honeymoon becoming a murder scene, and they eagerly watched the trial to learn how such a terrible incident could have happened. On the first day, the courtroom was crowded, with media, legal professionals, and relatives of Daniel and Rebecca occupying the benches. Grace and Thomas Keller, Rebecca's parents, sat in the first row with grim, drawn features. In the past, they had been optimistic about their daughter's future and saw her living a happy, prosperous, and family-oriented existence. They were now present to witness the guy they had once accepted as their son-in-law being held accountable for her heinous murder. Daniel Keller was portrayed by the prosecution as a guy who was driven by a need for control and jealousy. They explained how, on that fateful night in Fiji, his possessiveness and insecurity had turned fatal. Beginning with the forensic examination of Rebecca's wounds and the broken champagne bottle, the evidence of the crime was presented with accuracy. The CCTV evidence, which was difficult to ignore, was emphasized by the prosecution. It showed Daniel pulling Rebecca back to their property following the argument at the pub. The resort's employees and other visitors, who recalled the tense discussions and Daniel's growing rage, testified about his unpredictable behavior during the honeymoon. The violence on March 9, 2013, appeared to be the culmination of this cycle. Under the direction of a renowned lawyer, the defense team attempted to change the story. They maintained that Daniel was too drunk to fully understand what he was doing the night of the murder. They hauled in psychologists to testify about his tumultuous history, describing the emotional wounds caused by a turbulent home and an abusive father. These witnesses said that Daniel's actions were not those of a cold-blooded killer, but rather those of a man overcome by years of unresolved pain, as he had battled feelings of rejection and inadequacy throughout his life. Instead than presenting the murder as a willful act of violence, the defense aimed to present it as an unfortunate, unexpected accident. These attempts failed to persuade the jury. The defense's arguments fell short of explaining the heinousness of Rebecca's murder, and the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its decision on November 5, 2014, finding the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. There was a range of reactions in the courtroom to the announcement. As the reality of the sentence set in, Grace and Thomas Keller held each other while they sobbed in silence. As the truth of his conviction set in, Daniel sat still, his face white. On November 19, 2014, 2 weeks later, the sentencing was conducted. Daniel was given a life sentence by the judge, who made it clear that he would be incarcerated for the remainder of his life. The sentence gave Rebecca's family a sense of justice, but it did not bring them any closure. Their daughter's passing was a wound that will never completely go away. Both families' lives were forever altered in the wake of the trial. Thomas Keller and Grace Keller turned their sorrow into activism. They started a campaign to spread the word about domestic abuse, speaking at events all around the nation and sharing Rebecca's experience. By encouraging people to identify the warning signs of abusive and controlling conduct before it was too late, they hoped to spare other families the suffering they had endured. In another sense, the aftermath was terrible for Daniel's family. His parents, James and Marilyn Keller, found it difficult to make peace with the man who had done such a horrible thing and the son they had known. The once proud real estate family's reputation was damaged when they were the focus of rumors and public scrutiny. In an effort to avoid the stigma associated with Daniel's crime, They moved to a more sedate town and distanced themselves from social groups. Nevertheless, despite their seclusion, they were burdened with guilt and grief, lamenting the passing of Rebecca as well as the son whose life had gotten so out of hand. Once a refuge for honeymooners and those seeking luxury, the Fijian resort gained notoriety as the scene of the tragedy. Bookings drastically decreased in the months after the murder, tarnishing its previously immaculate reputation. The villa where Rebecca died became a frightening reminder of the violence that had destroyed their ideal settings for the staff members who had been there that night. Some quit their jobs because they couldn't handle the memories, while others stayed in the hopes that the anguish would go away with time. Over time, Rebecca's story evolved into a warning. In documentaries and features, news organizations re-examined the case, examining the perilous dynamics of partnerships that seemed ideal. Rebecca's memory endured because her friends frequently talked about her bright personality, her generosity, and her aspirations for the future. There were unanswered questions that remained after the incident. Was it possible for someone to step in sooner? Before they departed for Fiji, were there any indications that Rebecca's life was in jeopardy? Most disturbingly, if Daniel had sought treatment for the rage and fears that had overtaken him, may her death have been avoided? The trial and its fallout served as a terrifying reminder of the evil that may lurk behind a flawless facade. What started off as a beautiful celebration of love turned into unfathomable heartache, leaving both families to live with the terrible fallout for the rest of their lives. Be sure to check out our next story and remember to like and subscribe for more updates on disturbing situations. A vicious murder results from a covert affair between the coach and the cheerleader. We would love to hear your opinions, so please leave a comment below.